back. In a significant move to mark the 15th anniversary of the tragic terror attacks in Mumbai, Israel has officially designated Lashkar-e-Taiba as a terrorist organization. This comes as Israel is fighting its own battle with the terror group Hamas. The Israeli embassy said in a statement that all necessary procedures have been completed to declare LeT as a terror outfit, noting that the decision was made independently without any formal request from the Indian government. Now that Israel has declared LeT as a terror group, is it about time India blacklists Hamas as well? That's exactly what we're going to discuss in the next half an hour. Joining us on the show is Eli Nakht, Deputy Mayor of Ashdod, Israel. Also joining us on the show is Ambassador Bhaspati Mukherjee, former diplomat. Pathikrit Pine, international affairs expert, with us on the program as well on this important yet sensitive subject. Eli Nakht, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, what are your expectations from the Indian government at this point in time? You know, there has been a call by the Israeli ambassador in New Delhi to declare Hamas as a terrorist organization. You have done, something which is, of course, commendable, declaring the Lashkar-e-Taiba as a terrorist organization. Is it expected that India would do the same?
I think that a terror is not an issue or a problem of India or Israel. I think it's a worldwide problem, and there is no border for terrorism. And we already saw in the past how the same terrorists, and probably in different names, some of them is Al-Qaeda, some of them is ISIS, some of them is Hamas, some of them other organizations that you're probably more familiar with them. But the result is always the same, and their ideology is always the same. They want to make terror, instability, killing innocent. And I think that this, let's say, mission needs to be the mission upon all the I cannot say Western world because it's also in the East, but all the liberal democratic world around the world, where we understand the value of life, when we understand the value of democracy, when we understand that we don't want terror inside our country. And I think that Hamas is a world-known terror organization, and I think it will not be a big surprise if also India and maybe other states around the world that still maybe did not recognize and identified Hamas as a terror organization, today, after what they saw on the 7th of October, and all the evidence, and it's enough just to look on the covenant of Hamas, of the Hamas declaration, that it's publicly published. Everyone can see it. You can Google it. You can read what it says. It's a Nazi ISIS document. And after reading it, there is no any question about what sort of this organization. It's a terror organization. And that's why I think that as many other organizations, as Hezbollah, as Hamas, and other organizations worldwide, and Houthis and others, they need to be all put in the same category. They all need to be restricted with their money transfer, limited, and of course that needs to be also police and military and other enforcement measures taken against those organizations, cells of these organizations, training camps of these organizations, and leaders of this organization, and their personal bank accounts, of course, because we saw that the leaders, for example, of the same Hamas organizations, today they are multi-billionaires. They stole the money from the Gaza citizens, and each one of them worth about $4 or $5 billion. So, as we all see the same picture, as we all understand the same thing, I think we all need to unite in one battle against the terror worldwide, because we share, as Israel and India and other countries, the same values of life, of development, prosperity of our citizens. So I think what Israel is doing right now is, first of all, is a promo to the full movie that unfortunately we will see in the future and it will not be a nice movie to watch. And that's why we need to do as much as possible today in order to avoid the consequences in the future.
Well said, sir. Well said. Ambassador Mukherjee, what are your thoughts, ma'am? Should India also declare Hamas as a terrorist organization? Though we have shown, support for Israel, we've also shown concern for the humanitarian crisis fallout. But calling a spade, is not going to be a problem, I reckon.
Well, first of all, I would like to express appreciation for the actions of Israel, and to note that when these horrendous events happened in Mumbai so many years ago, there was the Israeli Consul General and his wife who were tortured and murdered. The little boy was saved by the Indian nanny and then brought up in Israel. The nanny was also there until he grew up. And so Israel has a particular reason for empathizing, as it always does with India, but in particular on this occasion, because it also lost its own people in a terrible massacre and anti-Semitic attack, which has never ever happened in India, because Jews have been living in India for millennia and never ever have they been the focus of any anti-Semitic attack. As far as Hamas being proscribed is concerned, there is a procedure just like what Israel follows, which is we normally proscribe terrorist outfits that are active against India. Okay? So for that reason, we are particularly grateful that Israel has not followed this principle with regard to India and has proscribed this Lashkar-e-Taiba. I'm sure that the decision of whether to proscribe or not to proscribe Hamas as a terrorist organization will be considered very carefully. But it must also be remembered that if India is to play a role, right now we are still president of the G20 till the end of this month, in trying to arrange some kind of role in this conflict, which would be accepted by both sides, then proscribing Hamas as a terrorist organization may not be of help to Israel either. So therefore, that the Western governments have proscribed Hamas is because of their own foreign policy and internal policy. Whether we choose to do so or not, we would consider carefully. And indeed, if we do proscribe Hamas as a terrorist organization, it would reflect our exceptionally warm ties with Israel, the support that we have consistently shown. There has been no demonstrations that I am aware of, significant demonstrations against our policy on Israel. We have refused to join in General Assembly resolutions which have not mentioned what happened on 7th October. So this would be a decision which would be carefully taken. But so far our policy has been, as it had been for Israel, to proscribe terrorist organizations which are responsible for attacking targets within India or outside India, Indian targets. So this is something we need to consider carefully.
Pathikrit, your take on this? Is it time that India also does follow suit and appreciate what Israel has done?
Well, Ambassador Mukherjee very beautifully explained about the tragic incident of 26/11 and how very unfortunate manner the Jews were also targeted for the first time in India. And Moshe Holzberg actually orphaned at the age of 2. In 2019, I remember when Prime Minister Modi actually wrote a letter to him, on a specific occasion. Frankly, let me tell you a couple of things. Israel has been, and it's known to everybody, has been a very strong partner of India in its counter-terror operations, starting from the assault rifles that we use, which is X-95 or the Israeli weapons industry Tavor, to the battlefield tactics or the drones. Yes, it is true that, as Ambassador Mukherjee mentioned, that there are protocols to be followed as to what should be defined as a terror organization. There are two important things. First, in this banning of Lashkar-e-Taiba, and let me tell you, Lashkar-e-Taiba or organizations like that, which are based in Pakistan, I see no difference, as was mentioned by Mr. Ali also, that there's no difference between how they perceive India and Israel and how Hamas perceive. So yes, there is perhaps a message from Israel in terms of banning Lashkar-e-Taiba, and perhaps there is a reciprocation they would also expect. Beyond the protocols, if you see, Vineet, what happened when ISIS was formed in the Middle East. Initially, India did not ban ISIS because it was not impacting India, but over a period of time, it was found that ISIS became a rallying point for radical organizations to mobilize to funds and people, and then to send them to that region in Syria to to fight and whatever everything else that happened. Today, ISIS and some of its offshoots have become a major potent threat to India. So I think in case of Hamas, what is happening is this, that once PFI is banned, Popular Front of India, and just for the sake of Mr. Ali and others, let me tell you, it's a very, very radical extremist Islamist organization. So it has been banned recently. Now, if we do not ban Hamas, even though it is very clear, India makes a clear-cut distinction between the issue of Palestine and Hamas, and India has condemned Hamas. But if we do not ban Hamas, I personally feel that the event that happened in Kerala with one of the founding members of Hamas actually giving a speech to youth of Kerala, of a particular organization, I think that sends out a dangerous message, because here was a person who was justifying what was happening, and that is not good when it comes to India. So if we do not want such events to happen in this country, where founders of Hamas or other organizations are called to give speeches, then we have to ban it, because otherwise what's happening, many of these organizations are taking the loophole or the pretext that this is not a banned organization, so we can call Hamas founders and let them spew venom against Israel, let them spew venom against everything else, and even spew venom against India also. That what that happened, that if you look at the title of that particular event. So I think it is a potent threat that is coming up. Hamas may not directly today be an issue for India, but through Hamas mobilization of funds and manpower, or radicalization of manpower, whether it happens or not, it's a very, very serious challenge for India. And I think there are potent threats concerning that. I'm sure the government of India, looking at the emerging dynamics of it, may take a call which would be a little different from the laid down protocols, and may take a decision as is expected by Israel, but it has to be seen. However, it would be very, very premature to say that Hamas or any of its offshoots, or inspired by Hamas, certain organizations will not try to do certain things in India which are inimical to Indian interests, considering that India is a strong supporter of Israel. So that is something that we have to be very careful about, even though India has made it very clear that it believes in the two-state solution and condemns Hamas. So I think I do not foresee that there are major problems if India takes a decision in banning Hamas. And if you ask me personally, I think it is needed, given the volatility of situation and how that issue can be used to mobilize manpower, radicalize people, and raise funds for activities which can be inimical, not just for the interest of peace of Middle East, but for India also, if not today, then in future. Vineet.
Absolutely. Great points there, Pathakrit. Ali Nak, do you think that despite some of the differences that two independent states like India and Israel are likely to have from time to time, the bond between these two nations is much bigger than banning the LET or the Hamas for that matter?
Of course, now our relationship between India and Israel is not based on recognizing this or that organization as a terror organization. Of course, this is not the main bond of our nations. We have a huge Indian community inside Israel. We have a wonderful trade going on between Israel and India that is just getting bigger and bigger with the time. We are supplying India with very sensitive equipment, let's put it like that. We share the same value. There is a wonderful personal relationship between Modi and Benjamin Netanyahu. we have cultural mutual things that we are responsible of, and of course this is not the main issue. And yet it's important to say that between friends and between allies, it's not just to continue doing what is good, and also where it's something it's a little bit uncomfortable. So when it comes to something a little bit uncomfortable and dangerous, this is also something that you expect from your allies to go with you. And it's important to say another thing, that a terror organization is usually probably understand that, of course, when it's weak, they recognize the weakness of this nation, and then it penetrates and become rooted much more in this or that nation. So if I have an experience of a history from my country that I can share to you, I can tell you in the beginning, don't be weak, don't show weakness in this kind of organization, because if you show weakness, they'll become bigger and they will grow much more into your land, into your nation. If you will be harsh to them, they will go and find another place where they're a little bit more welcome. That's why you need to kill them, excuse me for this expression, as they are small. This is, let's say, my experience and from our country of 75 years of independence, that what I recommend you as a big, powerful state that still never been in a such war situation, unfortunately, as Israel. And I hope we will not get to this situation, of course, again.
We've been in our own wars. Ambassador Mukherjee, how do you respond to what Eli has just said?
No, I meant war with terror, okay? Not wars in general, but in the modern...
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. We've had our stint with terror from time to time as well. Let's not forget that Pakistan and China are our neighbors. Ambassador Mukherjee, how would you respond to what Eli Nakht has just said? Of course, some very strong points being made by him.
He's made some very strong points, and I fully respect his perspective, coming from where he comes from and having gone through what Israel has gone through. At the same time, Vineet, it is important to understand that India has always argued in favor of a two-state solution. And India has always said that perpetual war and conflict is not good for either side to the conflict. And therefore, it is important that at some point the violence comes to an end, and that Hamas understands that Israel must live within secure borders, and Israel must understand that Palestinians too have the right to live safely in their own land, because they also had their land before they were displaced. These are two displaced peoples who have been put into eternal conflict by the white man who started the Holocaust. It was not Palestinians who started the Holocaust. It was the same white people who today are taking sides for their own reasons. The same colonizers who came and colonized us for 180 years, who are experts at divide and rule. Coming from India's history and India's perspective, we would therefore need to urge both sides of the importance of living peacefully and of a two-state solution which is inevitable if both sides are to live peacefully. Under those circumstances, our actions would flow from our extremely close bilateral relationship with Israel, our gratitude to Israel for all that they have done to stand by us in our moments of trouble, our reiteration that we as a nation will stand by Israel, but at the same time to urge both sides to come to the negotiating table and to work out a two-state formula, because that is the only foundation on which a permanent peace will be found. Because if you displace people forever and make them desperate and they have nowhere to go between the rock and the sea, then you are going to have violence perpetuated again and again in an unending cycle of misery and suffering. That is what I have to say on this matter, Vineet.
Pathakrit, your perspective on the two-state solution, is that going to suffice when it comes to this long-standing animosity between Palestine and Israel?
Vinit, before that, I just want to mention that I think India is perpetually at war against terrorism. And perhaps I think all of us know somebody or the other who has been in Kashmir fighting against terrorism, or in Punjab or elsewhere. So let me tell you one thing. Two-state solution, that is the stand of India, like many other countries. But it's also important that it is not just Israel. The Palestinians too must accept that Israel has the right to exist as a state. It has to be from both sides. It cannot be one side. Secondly, the reason why I believe that, India must speak against Hamas and ban it is because what is important to be also told that many of the Arab states in Middle East also do not like Hamas and what they plan to do with many of the monarchs. So it's not a problem of Israel alone. That's number two. Number three, look, if you ask me personally, from 2005 onward, there was no Israeli presence in the Gaza. So Hamas had a wonderful opportunity to create a model state out of Gaza. They could have created economic integration. They could have created an economic miracle out of Gaza. And instead of that, they created a whole bunch of 100,000 rockets. That is something that should be told to the world, that here was a golden opportunity for 16, 17 years, which they lost. And, we may keep on saying that Israel must go for the two-state solution. We also see that the Egyptians are not willing to open up the borders and allow everyone to come in, because they are also concerned what would happen tomorrow. So I think there has to be, if there has to be course correction, it has to be from both sides. It cannot be only Israel. It has to be the Palestinians as well, to accept that Israel has the right to exist. And at the same time, I remember there is a book by Wilbur Smith called Eagle in the Sky. And here was an Israeli Air Force officer who is telling to one of his juniors that if they lose a war, they lose a war. If we lose a war, we cease to exist. So there is an existential, panic which is always there in Israel. Whether we believe or feel that or not, that is another thing. But you have a Hezbollah, you have a Houthi, you have the Hamas. I think there has to be course correction. And I think many states of Middle East, including Saudi Arab and UAE, were moving towards that direction of Abraham Accord and bringing in a greater sanity in the whole place. India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor coming from Mundra port to Haifa would have created an economic wonder, an economic miracle in terms of a resilient supply chain. Some elements wanted to sabotage it. Who those elements are who are behind this October 7 attack? I mean, Gaza, Hamas knew exactly what would happen once they do what they did in October 7. They knew what was coming, which means that they were waiting that to happen so that the victim card can be played all over again. So I think there has to be sanity from both sides. And that's why I see states like Saudi Arab are coming out with a statement, while, in one way they do take a stand against IDF and saying, these innocents should not be killed, but they're equally blaming Hamas. So we must understand that both sides have to sit down, and it's not just the Israelis. They have to also sit down, the Arab states, and find a solution. Unless that happens, countries like India, which have their own crisis, we can only stand at a distance and wish good. But that has to be reciprocated from both sides, and accept that wrongs of the past, of the history, with all due respect, today everyone must live together. Just finger pointing one against the other, whichever side it is not going to help. Both sides have to coexist. Both sides have the right to exist. Both sides will have to honor each other. I think that's the only way forward. I have nothing more to say.
All right. Concluding thoughts from Eli and then Ambassador Mukherjee, and then we wrap up. Eli?
I think that Pathakrit said very smart things. And I think that we can see the shift in the world. On one hand, you see Arab states like Egypt and like others, Jordan, for example, where 70% of Palestinians, Qatar and Turkey, who are sending all the funds and money to the Hamas, and they're not willing to open their gate for the Palestinian people in Gaza, to let them inside, even if they have a common border between them. They don't want this problem because they understand that letting terror inside their country is a big, big problem. So if their own brothers, Arabs, are not the one who are willing to try to find the solution and reach a hand to help, so why Israel or any other country needs to be the one? On the other hand, we see the shift in Arab countries, in Arab world, as Saudi Arabia, who was just one step, one pace from normalizing relationship with Israel, with this Abraham, let's say, Abraham agreements, okay, that already are being made, and it's just getting broader and wider with more countries that normalizing their relationship with Israel because they understand that they want to be dealing with a normal, sustainable, democratic country, building a relationship, because exactly as Patrick said, the Palestinians had many times their opportunity. They said in the 40s, when they was proposed a two-state solution, they said no. In 2005, when we left the Gaza Strip, they could made out of their land a blooming nation and country. They use all the money for the bank account of the leaders to steal from the people, and the other money for the ammunition, the rockets, the bombing, the bunkers, the tunnels. That's what they did. And if this is the case, until they will change their ideology, until they will change their attitude towards Israel, towards the Middle East, towards themselves, who want to build a good country for their own nation, I'm sorry, we've been already in this dream. We cannot speak about two-state solution. We need a partner who respects us, and then we will respect him.
Understood. I understand and appreciate your emotions on this as well. Ambassador Mukherjee, quickly, ma'am, we've run out of time.
I would like to put certain things in perspective, because Patrick also has made a comment. I'd like to respond to that. First of all, the Egyptians will not open their gates because they do not want Israel to transfer the Palestinian problem to the Sinai desert. Because the Palestinians came from the land from where they are being driven. And the Egyptians are afraid that Israel will empty out the entire Gaza Strip population onto the Egyptian Sinai, which they don't want. And I would say, if I was an Egyptian, that I can perfectly understand that issue. Secondly, there is no doubt from what our Israeli colleague has said that there is a great need for Hamas to change its attitude. I would like to remind our Israeli colleague that it is unfortunate that the extreme right wing of Israel for years undermined the moderate Palestinian Authority and actually helped Hamas to rise, not realizing that this Hamas will one day bite the hand that is helping them to rise. Had Israel also supported moderate elements among the Palestinians, then perhaps this situation would not have come. So let us see the solution from both sides. Number one, the problem cannot be solved by Israel emptying out the Palestinian population onto Arab lands where they never came from. They came from the same land where Israel is. That's why they have to accept both sides, the two-state solution.
All right, ma'am.
Number two, the moderate elements even now need to be supported. But if they had been supported earlier, this would not have come. So it's a very great tragedy on both sides. And the only solution is a two-state solution.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.